Welcome to What the World Needs Now with hosts Tom Whisinnand and Josh Monroe. We hope you're able to leave today feeling encouraged and ready for another day of changing lives in the field of education as we speak with inspirational teachers from across the nation and world about what keeps their spark lit. Today we're blessed to be speaking with Paul Solarz, who has been teaching 4th and 5th grade in Illinois since 1999. He's best known for his 2015 book, Learn Like a Pirate, Empower Your Students to Collaborate, Lead, and Succeed. He's also been named a Top 50 Global Teacher Prize finalist by the Barkey Gyms Institute of Dubai. So, without any further ado, this is What the World Needs Now. All right, Paul. Hey, if you got on an elevator with somebody and you were giving them a quick elevator pitch on who you are, what are you telling them?
Well, I'm an experienced 20-year teacher teaching 4th and 5th grade in the suburbs of Chicago. I'm into the idea of student leadership in the classroom, trying to get the teachers off the stage and more be those guides on the sides. The idea of trying to teach skills rather than knowledge as more of the focus, even though you have to do both. Those are the kind of things I'd probably throw at them right away. But the idea that kids should love school and not despise it like, some children do. So, try to make school enjoyable.
I love that. I think.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think that's got to be every teacher's goal too, is that kids got to love school. I mean, if we want them to learn, they've got to love being there. And
yeah.
You talked about your book a little bit. I've read it. It's absolutely amazing. It's changed the way that I teach, with rear Jamickle at the end of the day, with give me fives. We call them red lights.
Uh-huh.
But it has changed the way that I teach. So could you talk about that a little bit? Because that's
Sure.
awesome. I love your book.
Hey, Josh, that means a lot. Thank you so much. I had never thought that I taught all that differently until Dave Burgess connected with me on Twitter. I had been blogging just to kind of share what I was doing, and I wanted to read other people's blogs, and it was just recommended to me that we reflect on some of the teaching experiences we create in the classroom. And I shared it on Twitter, and then got to know Dave a little bit informally. I kind of ran his chat on TLAP on Twitter every now and then. And he approached me and he said, "Hey, Paul, what do you think about writing like a follow-up to my book, Teach Like a Pirate? You could write something like Learn Like a Pirate. You don't have to call it that, but it would be nice to have kind of a follow-up to my book." And I go, "Oh gosh, what would I write about though, Dave?" And he's like, "Well, your blog is real good. You've got a lot of ideas in there, and some of the ways you're teaching and the things you're doing in the classroom are unique and kind of pushing the envelope a little bit in a good way. And I think people would like to hear what you have to say." So I said, "Absolutely. I've always wanted to write a book about something. It was always one of those dreams just to write a book someday, but I didn't know it'd be about teaching." So I started working on it, and I ended up, getting that acronym that helps to really organize the book. I got the acronym written out for Pirate, and I started writing, and I think I finished within I think the whole process took about 6 months, which is very short. But he had asked me in August. I think I got rolling, a month or two later, and then we were already at final edits by December, because January was when it went to go all the technical stuff to get it published. And it came out in March. So yeah, it was kind of a quick turnaround, but it writes itself when you're all about like who you are as a teacher. What are the things that make you you? What are the things you believe in to the core, and how do you do all those things? And that's what I wrote in Learn Like a Pirate.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great book. One that every teacher needs to read.
Thank you so much.
That's so cool. Hey, Paul, tell us about when you decided to go into education. You've had this great journey, and you've had these amazing accolades we'll get into in a little bit, but like, take us back on this journey, like when you decided, yes, I want to be a teacher, and not just any teacher. I want to be an amazing teacher. I want kids to love learning. How'd that
Yeah,
start for
sure.
you?
I think I follow a little bit of a different path than most. A lot of the greatest teachers that I know are those kids who, as a little kid knew they'd be a teacher. They're like, oh, I love school and I love this and I love that. And I was the kid who said, oh my God, get me out of school. Like I'm so done, as a fifth grader, sixth grader, seventh grader, I'm like, I don't need this, get me out. And I said, oh man, whatever job I end up with, it just better not be near a school, because that's the last place I want to be. And so I had no intention of becoming a teacher for much of my childhood. I don't think I would have ever considered it until 18, 19 is when I started thinking about it. I had been doing, late high school, you pick up jobs over the summer for different things, and I was a camp counselor when I was, I'll say 17, 18. And both those summers, I got a lot of feedback from, these were like Cub Scouts and stuff, like little scout camps and things, from the parents saying, man, you really made nature fun. And, you really did some cool things. And I'm like, yeah, I brought those, like those where you can imprint leaves onto paper with the sun, and I'm like, this is cool. I got to have it. So they give you like a little budget of $100 or something. And so I
Yeah,
went and tried to make it the best I could make it. And I had so much fun being around the kids, and the fact that they were like enjoying it, their parents were saying, wow, this is great. They really love when you're teaching them. So I said, okay, well, that's good. I didn't know that I'd want to do anything with that, but it planted the seed. And when I went away, so I did 2 years at a local community college, not knowing what I wanted to do. But as I transferred, they made you decide. So I said, all right, so I'm kind of between business and maybe trying the teaching thing. But I said, I can always get a job in a business with an education degree and then go for my MBA, but I can't be a teacher with a business degree. So I think it's just the safest thing to do is to try to become a teacher first. If I absolutely hate it, I can always switch majors or whatever, but I loved it. I've never, not 1 second did I consider turning back. And I mean, it was easily the right choice for me. I absolutely have loved my 20 years in the classroom, and I can't imagine doing something else. So.
That is awesome. I think the experience that you had going into education definitely shaped, like, get me out of here. I want the kids to be the focus of this. It's all about them. So that is so cool. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so traditional. I was, in such traditional classrooms that it was great to have, this idea of be the non-traditional teacher a little bit. And I even wanted to replace one bad teacher in the world. I thought if I got a job, that's one less bad teacher that could get a job is what I was hoping for, just in my mind, bad, like we're all, you can't be judgmental, but in my mind, I wanted to replace one teacher that didn't want to be there at least.
Yeah. Oh.
Right. That's an awesome story. Because you're right. A lot of teachers have that backstory of playing teacher as a kid with their siblings, and then it just evolves from there. What an awesome story. And in your 20 years, I mean, it's clear that you've inspired tons of kids and teachers. But has there ever been a time in your career where your spark starts to dwindle, that you felt kind of in a low?
Yeah. So for my first, I would say 7 or 8 years, I remember having this conversation with a couple of my colleagues. I would rather wake up and go to school than not, than stay home or whatever. I was like, so like passionate and gung-ho and loved everything about my job. Now, as you get older, it's a little harder to wake up sometimes, maybe. I don't know, but it dwindled a little. I always loved being a teacher, but I think I said, okay, somewhere around the 7th or 8th years when I said, well, I think I'd rather sleep in or I'd rather take a day off. But I think, that wasn't because of anything bad. But I will say that I was always affected, and I have been always, I'm talking, I don't think I've told the audience, I'm on leave for 2 years because I'm taking care of my mother who had strokes. So I'm on the 2nd year of that leave. And it's just important to know that I'm talking as if I'm done teaching, but I'm not necessarily done teaching. In those 20 years, there were times when I might get an email from a parent that was written in a way that just was very intense and very, negative for some reason. And I'm not a parent, so it was not always easy for me to know how this feels, you know, when you're advocating for your child always. You know, some parents advocated great, and some parents probably needed to fix that, their language, the words that they used. I now have a niece and nephew who are teenagers, and I help my sister, you know, with communicating with the teachers and stuff. One has a IEP, one has a 504. So, you know, we have to advocate in nice, kind ways. We get along great with all the staff and everything, but there are times when you have to write the tough emails of, you know, well, my son just got an F on the report card and I haven't heard from the special ed teacher in a while, you know, things like that. You know, you sometimes have to write tough emails, but you go through the email and you try to look at, you know, how is it coming off? Is my point to try to make them feel bad, you know, about what they're doing, or is my point really to try to fix the situation, you know, and make sure that my nephew and my niece are getting the help that they need or whatever. So I will say that parent emails could rock my world for a couple days and really send me in a really, you know, negative place in my head, you know, like, oh, teaching is hard and it's not, you know, I'm doing a great thing here, they don't even know. And, you know, you start talking in your head about things. And, you know, everyone who knows me said, Paul, you just got to stop that. You can't worry about pleasing everybody all the time. You can't take it personally. A lot of times this is, you know, something that the parent is struggling with their child with, or they're having their own struggles at home. And almost always it was not really about me. Maybe they would have done it differently, but by the end of the school year, every parent pretty much, I mean, there were some parents that didn't love me, but the parents would say, you did a good job. My child learned a lot, and, you know, you obviously cared about my kids. So, you know, I think no matter how I felt after some tough emails or tough, maybe an administrator, you know, saying I should do something different or whatever, it always bounced back to, well, you're always doing what's right for kids, and they always turn out really well. So, you know, ultimately it didn't matter the individual steps you took to get there. They always knew they were cared for, and you know, you were always trying your hardest. So I think what I would like to say to people is, if you can try not to take it personally, that's really good advice. I've never been great at it. I wish I was better at it, but I think that is something that makes you lose your inspiration a little bit, you know?
Yeah, that's so hard. That's so hard. And like in today's world with COVID and online teaching and in-person teaching, or some kids not be able to be there with remote learning and all this stuff. Man, it is hard to stay inspired. And I know that there's people out there that are really struggling with it. So, Paul, what are some ways that you personally have stayed inspired in the classroom, or currently stay inspired with the situation with COVID and everything going on? Are there certain books? Are there certain people that you connect with on a regular basis? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think for me, the main source of inspiration has honestly been Twitter, which I know that's been said for many years, and I'm sure many educators who aren't on Twitter are tired of hearing it. But you know, Twitter is a little bit of a place people go to find inspiration, to get reassurance, to learn new strategies. And for me, you know, I run the I don't always run it. I organize the Learn Lap chat on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Central. And it's just, I very rarely actually moderate it. I ask for volunteers because nobody needs to hear my perspective every week after week after week. We get different people who'll run it, and I'll just help guide them writing the questions. And I may not always have something to add to every question that's put out there, but I read every answer that people write, and I favorite them, and I consider them, you know, and I think about how that could, you know, impact my teaching. So, and it's not just LearnLap. I mean, you can go and just look at a certain hashtag or follow a certain couple people. There's a lot of inspiration on there for you. I also love to read blogs. You know, I found, you know, if you were a teacher 30 years ago, you might have enjoyed reading Mailbox Magazine or something like that, you know, and nowadays the blog is kind of like our teacher magazines, you know, blogs. I enjoyed writing my blog. I found that I could really get creative with the way I shared what I did and why I did it. And I think other people are doing that too. And there are just some amazing educators out there who are willing to take the time to share so many great ideas. You know, I feel like I'm getting super value out of paying nothing, you know, when I'm reading these blogs. You know, like if you don't buy an educational book ever again, at least read a blog. You know, you can do that for free. It's so many great things on blogs out there. Just take advice from different people, which ones are the ones to read, because there's some really good ones out there. And then the last thing is I do have a lot of teacher books. I don't know, I'm not sure anybody cares, but that's my professional library. That's my
you're a bit of
all teacher books for that whole spread. Yeah, from left to right, it's all teacher books. So I'm a collector, but I'm also a reader of them, you know, and I just don't like to let go. Yeah, I don't like to let go of them though after I've read them, because I always feel like I can go back and, you know, I'll be like, oh, I know in that one book I can find another idea about this. And
now, nice do you take notes and highlight in your books? Like, do you make a mess of your books when you read them, or do you just keep them clean?
So the best way to evaluate whether I like the book or not is how much I've written in it. So, you know, if you look through Innovator's Mindset by George Couros, I have so much written in that book, because it was ideas and agreements, and I was basically, you know, commenting on everything he wrote. You know, and if you look at Donald Miller's book, Not Reading in the Wild, the first one, I wrote a lot of things.
Book Whisperer?
Yes, thank you, Book Whisperer. I wrote a lot of things in there, but some of it was like angry. I'm like, no, Donald, you know, and I love the book. I absolutely love the book, but I was yelling at her. And then you read the rest of the book and you realize, well, she has a really good point. But, you know, she also talks in extremes where she'll say things like, don't do this and you must do this. And I'm just not a don't and a you must kind of person if I can help it, you know, but her point is right. You know, get kids reading. That's really what it's about. And I so believe in that. And that was, I mean, we did literature circles, I called them, but they weren't traditional, the whole year. And that's how I taught all my reading skills, was through those book studies and those novel groups. So, you know, I get it. I totally agree. But you know, when you like a book and you're really invested in what you're reading, I write a ton in them and have a lot to say about it and flag things, you know, and say, I got to do this and I got to try that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that Donald Miller's book changed the way that I do reading as well. I call it reading conferences, but it totally transformed the way that I look at reading. And now my goal is to get kids to love reading again, in a lot of the ways that she talks about in that book. And then you talked about the Learn Lab and just learning from other educators on Twitter. That's an awesome thing. Just the other day, you tweeted out a resource for teachers, the nuts and bolts of feedback for educators. It's such an easy way for teachers to become re-inspired and to find easy resources. So thank you for doing that.
You know, that was fun. The company Floop, Floop, Floop.com, actually Floop EDU or something like that.com. They're doing some really cool things with feedback from the teachers and from students. I guess that it would work both ways. And they asked me if I would write something for them. And it just so happened that the book that I'm currently working on right now has an overlap to that feedback section. So that's actually a preview to some stuff that's going to be in my book that I want to come out in the next maybe 6 to 8 months. There's actually 5 sections of that we released. So there's tons. It's the nuts and bolts of feedback was the first section, and then it's all about giving quality feedback, asking for feedback, using feedback effectively. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool how we broke it down together and worked together as a team on that one. So I hope people will find it. I think it might still be linked at the top of my Twitter feed, Paul Solarz on Twitter, if anybody's interested in looking at it. It's good. It's like graphic organizers, you know, and things that you can do to really help kids learn how to be better at giving and accepting feedback.
That's awesome. That's cool.
So you talked about George Couros for a minute there, and we had the pleasure of, he actually spoke at our back to school conference, I guess you would call it, and I got some great ideas from him, and his books are great. But in your opinion, what's the most innovative programs or apps or curriculums or things that you do in your classroom with your students?
Yeah, so I'm not a huge program curriculum kind of guy. I find that they're very helpful for teachers starting out. They're very helpful for ensuring that every skill or standard or objective or whatever is taught, within a year. But they're done in ways that aren't as good at, being focusing on your students. They're not, like if a student's struggling with it, they don't always have a good solution for it. They can't know why the kid is struggling all the time. So I'm not a huge fan. I love the idea of here's all the stuff that you need them to know. And then I like to take that and make it my own and say, okay, I'll make sure they know it by the end of the year, and I don't know that I want to use those packets, and I don't want to have to give all those lectures with those scripts, that I have to say this at this time. And, so for me, I'm not a huge fan. However, I have found some that have been really good that I've used over the years. Not that you want specifics. I think you probably want more the idea that I don't love programs on their own, but I'll give you a couple examples. One of the textbooks that I've used over the years, believe it or not, called We the People from the Center for Civic Education, had something like 28 lessons or 34 lessons or something in it. And I actually taught all 34 lessons with my kids because there were so many things that you could do within each lesson that my kids loved, like having a panel debate and, acting out different scenes and putting yourself in a simulation of some sort where you got to be the captain of a ship, and there was a mutiny, and you had to talk about what rights do you have to discipline your employees, whatever. And we had to go up against a panel, and like there were so many great ways of teaching. It was really so that you'd learn about Constitution and our government. And yeah, we definitely learned about all that, but we had so much fun doing it. And, I'd skip anything that I don't really think was necessary. I didn't necessarily make them have to pass every test or quiz or, it wasn't about memorizing information. It was about learning through experiences. And I found that it was written in such a way that was very kid friendly. It was very colorful. There were drawings all over. I actually went to Washington, DC, and they sent me there for 9 days to learn some great strategies with this program. And it was outstanding. But in general, textbooks, I'm really not a fan. I find them to be really dry and confusing, and their focus is on, information retention and facts and vocabulary. And I would much rather know what the purpose of each chapter was and sit down and have a conversation with my kids, maybe show a few, visuals or short clips, and teach it that way. But, textbooks I generally tend to stay away from otherwise. We have a science program called Science Companion, which is great in that it has like experiments and hands-on inquiry, things that you can do along the way that the kids kind of can discover scientific concepts. I think that's cool. I didn't leave it at that. If you only taught the 8 lessons of the chapter, I think by the end of the chapter, the kids wouldn't necessarily know how they all related to each other. I don't think that, it was not always, but at the same time, when you know what the purpose of the unit is, you can supplement and you can tie things together, and you can really expand things. But you have to have the time, and both of those are science and social studies examples. And I know that the teachers at my school right now get 45 minutes once a week for one of those at the moment. That's what when they're in the classroom for blended, and before that, before blended even came, before COVID even came, the schedule was 45 minutes of content once a week. And I don't know how you can do the cool things. And it's not just cool and fun. It's you're integrating research skills and reading and writing, and you're getting kids collaborating, and you're learning through some, like speaking skills. And there's so much value in that if you use it, that it's such a shame that they're not able to do that because sometimes the time is so restrictive.
It's how you engage kids. It's great teaching is what you're
Yeah.
doing. And it's not following a curriculum. It is engaging kids on every level. Their
Yeah.
social needs are being met. Their emotional needs are being met. Their learning needs are being met. And man, that is tough when you don't have the time to really sit down and plan for it. That is
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, you have to kind of cheat. You do. You have to cheat a little bit. And I've been known to have to do a social studies lesson in reading time. And and yeah, sometimes I have kids pulled or kids
Mhm.
that have maybe a teacher pushes in, but I'll just tell the teacher, what we're going to be reading today during social studies during the reading time. But we have to be able to do some of this stuff because it's important. It's content area literacy, and there's so much more than just that, but we have to integrate subjects in order to fit in what we believe is important. And
Mm.
I very much believe that science and social studies has an important place in our curriculum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And you getting really creative, figuring out how to tie everything together, and like you said, to figure out how to cheat time a little bit.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And it gets easier when you've taught for a little while because now, oh, you know what, last year I had to teach a skill that would go great with this. So maybe if I don't get it this year, I can get it next year. So, you might need a couple of years to just realize what you're teaching, a year or two to say this would go great, next year if I could teach this together. And then you get next year, if you're planned and you're organized, you can do it. So you just start remembering, science fair is a great time to teach blah, 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 or whatever. You just know you can integrate some skills from different content areas or different subjects.
Yeah.
And I like too how you talked about, like, if you're a first year teacher, that manual is really good to have, but once you start getting comfortable, you can start moving away from it a lot more, realizing here's the skill they need to know, here's what we can do to reach that skill, and it doesn't have to come from this book.
That's right. Yep, very true.
Paul, there's a lot of issues facing educators today. Tons of issues. We just talked about one of them, time. What are some other big rocks in the educational world that you think that we need to be aware of, that we need to be actively dealing with?
Being on leave, I assume this is an issue for people, but I'm going to talk about a different one because I can't speak to it. But as I sit with my niece and nephew many days a week working on schoolwork during the Zoom, I see the difficulty of how to make e-learning effective. So I'm not going to speak much on it because I'm out of the classroom. I'm not doing it, but I think it's a real challenge because I know what my niece and nephew were learning before coronavirus, and I know how much of a struggle it is for them now to pay attention, to get much out of their learning. They're kind of going through the motions. They're kind of just doing what they have to do to try to be successful, but they're not entirely successful. I think we need to learn how to make it most effective, and I'm not the one to teach that because I'm not doing it, but boy, did I have ideas when we first went remote. I had a lot of ideas. I just don't know what it's morphed into it at this point. So I hope people are definitely working on doing that because you just never know when this is going to be full blown back to school or whatever. Right. So separate from that, though, I think what I'd like to talk about is something that I've talked about for a few years now, globally, like in the Middle East. I've gotten to speak on this. It's the idea of pivoting from our focus on teaching information and gaining and making kids have this knowledge base to teaching skills and concepts, but concepts already get enough credit in the knowledge area. Skill, skills that are transferable to new situations. So, we focus in our classroom on 34 what I called 21st century skills. That's what I've called them. But I mean, I've been using them for 15 years or something. So that, at that point it was kind of like, oh, we're going to really be on top of these skills. There's skills that have been around forever, but what made them 21st century skills, like problem solving and creativity and dealing with others and whatever, what made these 21st century skills to me were, in the 21st century, we should be focusing on these skills more so than the content. So, I'm going to use math to try to get my kids to become better critical thinkers, and to problem solve. But my focus isn't going to be just on the methods that the students use to solve each problem. It's going to be on learning critical thinking skills and problem solving skills that they can adapt and use for the future. So, I mean, that's a kind of a bad example because there are some good binders and kits out there for problem solving skills. You know, you can try guess and check, and you can try this and that. But the idea is I try to find, you know, where I can teach the skills that I feel the kids need for the future. How can I integrate that into my curriculum, but make it more about the skill than it is just about the curriculum? So, you know, all year we're collaborating. You know, my kids almost never work independently when we're in the classroom together. And people might say things like, well, how do you assess their own individual skills? And how do you, how do you ensure, that they're the ones learning it? Well, honestly, when you're working collaboratively all day, every day, you get to spend more time with your kids discovering who they really are, that you know which kids struggle with what and which kids are really the leader or the one who sometimes dominates, and that's not always great either. You get to know your kids so well that you don't, maybe I didn't know that on this particular assignment that they struggled with this particular skill today. But if you do that skill over the course of 2 or 3 days, you know it because you're walking around and you're talking to the kids. So I don't need individual assessments for every kid all the time. Observational assessment is honestly highly effective when you're off the stage and you're circulating, giving feedback, coaching, helping, like making sure that kids, are getting along, because that's a skill, but not, you don't do it for them. You don't fix all their problems. You say, oh, I notice you're having trouble. What are you going to do? You're trying to build up these skills. And that, I'm 4th and 5th grade. So I don't know how much of a, age range that's still necessary as far as like behavioral skills, but I do know that, I'll sit next to my niece and nephew and they'll say, okay, we're in a breakout room with other kids. And they're like, oh, we got to be with other kids. And I'm like, why wouldn't you want to be with other kids? They love friends. They have tons of friends. Oh, because it's awkward. You have to talk, about something that you don't care about and there's no teacher there to watch you. And, and I feel like, our classroom is all about talking about the things, and you have to fake it till you make it, or you have to really be invested. So, I when they're not that invested, I say, well, fake it till you make it, because that's what we do. We all have to show that we care one way or another, and I think that those skills are just so valuable. So, I wish that we could have more of a focus on skills acquisition than content. And I wish that it could drive our planning to the degree that our curriculum currently drives our planning, because I think that's what colleges are going to want more so than, did you read Shakespeare? Yes, they still ask for that, but I think they care more that the kid knows how to do their own work without having to have a parent help them in college than Shakespeare.
Right.
And job, the job market is saying, we don't need these kids to come knowing every little thing about calculus and this and that. We just really want them to know how to get along with others, how to solve their problems, how to, the list. So
yeah,
absolutely. And you talk about college and career ready skills. That's perfect. Yeah. Man, you're getting me pumped. Like, I'm ready for school. I'm ready for school tomorrow.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, so Paul, we've talked a lot about what inspires you and how people can be inspired. And if you can take everything that you've learned over the course of not just your career, but your life, what would you say that the world needs now?
Yeah. I think when it comes to education, I think we need teachers who see things that aren't working and say, I need to solve this problem and do something different. I see, a classroom filled with students with their heads down, and there's their cameras up to the sky or whatever for half the Zoom class, and they call on them and they're like, what? I think you got to see that, and you got to say, you know what, I want to solve this. I don't know that I can solve it for the world, but I can solve it for my kids. So if nothing else, I would like to see people who take control over the things that aren't working rather than just continue to do it the way they've been told to do it. So I want risk-taking teachers. I want teachers that ask for forgiveness rather than permission. I want teachers who try new things in the classroom and say, this one didn't work, but I had the right reasons for trying it. I wanted to improve the situation. So if every teacher did that, you know, and really their purpose was to improve things, not to, you know, to get away with something, you know, like not to make it easier on them. I honestly think we could solve a lot of the problems with e-learning at the moment. And then in general with teaching, I think we use a lot of excuses. You know, do we have to do this because our administrators tell us to? Do we have to follow the curriculum exactly as it is? I think the idea is make it work for your students and make school a fun place for them to be, not just fun, but a place that they're going to learn what's most important. You know, it's not just a factual room, you know, it's more than that. So build those relationships, take those risks, and push education forward.
I love that, because we ask our kids every day to be risk takers. We better be doing it ourselves.
That's right. We have to model what we want.
Right.
Exactly. Gosh, Paul, it is so amazing to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking some time.